Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second community meeting for the Hillview Court development here in Milpitas. My name is Kelsey. I am a Jamboree staffer, and I just wanted to turn my camera on, introduce myself. Myself and my colleague, Kaylin Murphy, are going to be the technical support on today's call. If you have any questions, any issues, you can message us privately. We'll also be sending information into the chat throughout the meeting, so please look in there for additional information. A couple of things. We ask that you keep your microphone muted while the presentation is going on. There will be a section where we allow you to unmute your microphone and ask us any questions that you have. And I just also want to note that this meeting is being recorded and will be shared at a later date. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Danielle and Roger from Jamboree.
Thank you, Kelsey. Welcome everyone again to the Hillview Court virtual meeting. Hillview Court is the conversion of the extended stay hotel into 132 affordable apartment homes with leases. This development will create homes, not a shelter. Next slide, please. My name is Roger Kinoshita, and I will be joined by Danielle Latieri, who's Director of Services. Also joining us tonight will be staff members from the County of Santa Clara, as well as folks from Destination Homes. The city of Milpitas has withdrawn from this meeting. Next slide. Jamboree is a 30-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer. Our mission is to deliver high-quality affordable housing and services that transforms lives and strengthens communities throughout California. Jamboree is California's largest nonprofit developer of affordable housing. Next slide, and I will hand it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Roger. So I'm just going to start a little bit with the challenge that we face right now. As most everyone in this virtual room knows, that there is a housing crisis on our hands, and we do have a homelessness crisis. Both these are nationwide, but especially in the state of California, we see that. Homelessness impacts people and neighborhoods throughout Santa Clara County and throughout the state. And this homeless population is diverse. I think we all kind of have a traditional idea of what a homeless individual is. We most of the time think of the individual standing on the street corner with a sign, or we think of someone in the bus stop that's screaming at themselves or screaming at the ongoing traffic. However, that's not the case. We have a diverse population of individuals experiencing homelessness, including veterans, families with children, and working individuals. The housing crisis affects everyone, but especially those who are very low or extremely low income. Those who are living on minimum wage, as the apartment prices go up, their income just isn't going up to match those prices. So we really do have a big issue at our hands. So what is the solution? The solution is affordable housing for these individuals to find housing and get the support they need. Supportive housing is a proven solution to end homelessness. There are a myriad of research articles out there showing this. I'm not going to bore everyone going into the details, but they are out there. We're making progress. The Santa Clara County has a bunch of supportive housing projects across the county. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but Santa Clara County is building this and is following this solution. Managing homelessness is actually a lot cheaper to put them in housing than to keep them on the streets. Destination Home has a great study showing this. That goes, it is much more expensive to keep an individual living on the streets than bringing them into housing and getting the supports that they need so they can get themselves off their feet. And I think we have a traditional idea and concept of what supportive housing is, low income housing is. As someone who grew up outside of LA, I think of the projects in LA, where it's row after row of housing that all looks the same, the barbed wire fences, the trash everywhere, the broken down cars. That's not the case. Nowadays, that is not what supportive housing is. It's building nice apartment homes that look just like market rate and becoming a neighborhood asset. We're going to go into a little bit more details about the population. As we said, the homeless population is diverse, and we keep this in mind when we're coming into a community, and we work with the county, we work with the city, we work with partners to identify what is needed in that community. So here's just a snapshot of individuals experiencing homelessness in Santa Clara County. So only 9% of those experiencing homelessness are families with children. 7% are veterans. A big number that kind of hit me was 36% of individuals experiencing homelessness in the county are the first time experiencing it. That's a big number. So it's not those that have been on the streets forever and what everyone thinks want to be on the streets. It's a lot of individuals are first time homelessness. And another big one that got me was 59% of those experiencing homelessness stated their homelessness was caused by job loss, divorce, or eviction, which I think this goes against that stereotype that we all kind of have of an individual experiencing homelessness. It kind of hit home with me of any of those things could happen to anyone, and without the right support system or the right job and nest egg and savings, that could become almost anyone. So gives us just a broader picture of those who are experiencing homelessness in the county. Here's a map showing the different supportive housing in the county. As we can see in last community meeting, people asked, why Milpitas? Why aren't we building elsewhere in the county? There is supportive housing going elsewhere in the county. As you can see, the green houses are completed projects across the county. Yellow are under construction, and purple are pre-construction. So as you can see up here in Milpitas, there's no projects there as of right now. So what is supportive housing? We kind of looked at why we need it and how it is the solution. So what is it? It is this affordable housing combined with supportive services. You can't have housing without the services for this to be a solution. All the research shows it's combining these two things. It's combining this high quality affordable housing with population specific services. It is recognized as a national best practice, as I said, for chronically homeless individuals and individuals that have a disability or special needs. And again, this is not a shelter. So this is creating housing for individuals. They're signing a lease while living here. It's not a shelter where they only spend the night or are kicked out in the day. It's not a drop-in center where people can come and line up in the morning for a shower and a free meal. This is independent housing with individuals that have support services on site, staffed in-house to help them meet their needs and get what they need. I think this is a great visual representation of kind of what our supportive services are. So these are those wraparound services. We have supportive housing in the middle. So it's all about getting an individual into housing, and then we can work on all these different areas of life. I kind of just take the first one of employment and look at how is someone who's homeless supposed to go get a job? You kind of start working through it. It seems, well, okay, they're homeless, they need a job, so then they can pay for housing and get to where they need to be. But when you're on the streets, you don't know where you're sleeping that night. Where are you going to get your breakfast? Where are you going to get your coffee? You have a job interview the next day. Where are you going to iron your clothes so you can go to the job interview? We need to print our resumes on that fancy nice paper when you're going to go in to talk for that interview. Where are you going to print it out? Where are you going to keep it overnight? Let's say if you print it out at the library. So there are a lot of issues when an individual is experiencing homelessness. By getting them into housing first, you can help work on all of those with the appropriate supports on site. So this site that we're proposing will have 9 to 12 staff members offering all these services to make sure that our residents are getting what they need. And so what does it look like? I talked about what it doesn't look like. It's not the project, it's not a homeless shelter. You can see the pictures below here that it looks like market rate affordable housing. These are assets to a community. Jamboree has experience in a myriad of different models. And we have done these models across the state of California. We are all the way in San Diego, all the way up to Sacramento, and we've implemented these models successfully. And we believe that we can do that here in Milpitas with the right partnerships. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Roger, and he's going to go a little bit more into this specific project.
Thank you, Danielle. Hillview Court, as mentioned earlier at the beginning, is a conversion of the hotel into 132 studio apartments. Once again, not a shelter. We are going to be building out about 6,000 square feet of community space, and I'll go over a little bit more about the details on that in a few minutes. And we will also have on-site 2 property managers living on-site to provide 24/7 on-site staffing. Next slide, please. This is the plans we have for the community space. It is 6,000 square feet. It includes 6 case manager or counseling rooms. It also includes 6 offices for property managers and the supportive services staff. It also includes a lounge about 300 square feet where the residents can come down and relax. And it also includes a large multi-purpose area that includes a kitchen that allows them to not only learn how to cook, but also cook down there and meet fellow residents, and to have activities, group activities, and we also have planned areas for one-on-one in the case manager's offices, but also larger group activities when it's appropriate and safe to do so. We have larger spaces for those larger meetings and presentations and activities that we have planned for our residents, not only at Hillview Court, but that we actively have on a regular basis at our other supportive housing projects. The property in Milpitas resides on about 3 acres, and there are approximately 160 parking spaces at the property. And I'll turn it over to Danielle.
You got one more, Roger.
Oh, one more. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
The timeline for the property is to acquire the property in November, do some minor interior building improvements in December, and have residents and tenants move in December of 2020.
Alrighty, and so I'm just going to go over what Jamboree offers. This might be a review for some of you on our previous community meeting, but bear with us. So Jamboree, we're an active long-term owner. We own our properties for at least 55 years. We're not coming in, building, and leaving. So we are a long-term partner in that community. And we have over 30 years of experience doing this, as we mentioned. So we have found an effective solution for managing these sites. And so kind of what Jamboree brings to the table is oversight and coordination. We do this through our asset management team, our on-site services team, and through a third-party professional property management team. And it's all about these teams working together to make these properties a success. And so our on-site resident services team is there 5 days a week, 7 days a week if needed. And we have a model specific for this population based in research of what services we're going to be offering. We integrate with the on-site property management team and work really closely with them and any county partner or other service provider partner to make sure that we're monitoring and managing the site efficiently. Jamboree does have specific outcome measures that we expect our site to hit. And so we're always monitoring that, looking at the data, making sure we're hitting all those points that we need to. That's the physical property and our residents and the services and what's going on site. We do inspections. So our corporate teams from Orange County and our corporate team from Sacramento will actually go on site multiple times a year to have eyes on to make sure it's living up to the Jamboree standard. And there's countless meetings between corporate staff, ground staff, the housing authority, our county partners, just making sure that we all know what's going on site and we're all working together to be providing the best services and to be the best neighbor. And Jamboree offers that resident services plan that I talked about that's specific for the population. And the things that kind of go into that is we're really looking at what the resident needs are. We work with the county when the residents are coming to us. Okay, what needs do they have? Do we have a lot of people that don't have a job? Do we have people that want to go back to school? We look at what those needs are, and then we look for partners in the community and within amongst our teams to offer those services. We look at the design and location. That's our physical building, as Roger showed the beautiful community space. All right, what can we do in this community space? What services can we provide? What community events can we provide? And then we do look at the local resources around us to make sure that we have the best plan in place to move forward. And so this on-site services team for this site is going to be the County of Santa Clara and their chosen service provider and the Jamboree supportive services staff. So all of us will be working one-on-one with residents to be making sure that they have referrals to the appropriate resources that they need to get their needs met. We're going to coordinate social and community events, wellness events. That looks anything from a GED class on site to a coding class to a cooking class. Whatever we see those needs are, that's going to be happening right there on site. And the overall goal of our services team is to be making sure that residents stay housed. They have a safe and affordable place to live where they can have the support wrapped around them to meet their goals. And as I said, there's going to be about 9 to 12 staff here. The county and their contracted provider are going to be offering clinical services. And the Jamboree is going to offer additional support and community building services and life skills services. So we're going to have clinicians all the way down to peer support specialists, sorry, that's a tongue twister, to making sure that resident needs are going to be met. We get asked a lot about security. So this site is access controlled. We will know everyone who is coming and going from the site. We have visitation protocols for anyone who's not a resident on site. They're very specific. It's laid out in their lease and their house rules of what times, who, how many days guests can come. So it's not like we have a house now, bring all of our friends and live here. That is not something that can happen. We have 24/7 coverage with 2 full-time on-site property managers who live on site. And we have security cameras completely inside and outside the building, so we always know what's going on. And then we do have a 24/7 response for our supportive services team, so we can answer calls if something does happen those after hours to make sure that our residents have the support that they need. And there's a process to become a resident. So I think a lot of times people start thinking, okay, we have this housing now for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. They're just going to start flocking here and try to move in. No one can walk in and try to apply here. It's done through a very coordinated effort that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So no one's just coming in to move in. No one's coming up and lining up for drop-in services. This is permanent housing where individuals sign a lease. All right, and good neighbor policy. As I said, Jamboree is a long-term owner. We're in the community for 55 years, so we want to be a good neighbor and a good partner. In our mission statement that Roger read, it is all about strengthening community, and so we want to do that here in Milpitas. We do use the coordinated entry system, so we do partner with the county to get our residents, and the coordinated entry system is a county-wide intake process that matches an individual to the best housing that is specifically to their needs and what they are experiencing. So it's really handpicked individuals to live here, making sure that the housing meets the individual needs. As I've talked about, we do sign a lease. So everyone moving in signs a lease. It's not a shelter. They're not just here overnight, one night at a time. We determine how they stay. They come in, they sign a lease. They can stay as long as they would like, as long as they're following their lease, and it's renewed year to year. But people can get evicted. People think, oh, they come in, they can do whatever they want in these units and it's going to run amok. No, we do follow an eviction's best policy. So if an individual comes in, I think people think, oh, they're going to be drinking, smoking, having parties, doing whatever they want in here. And that is 100% not the case. That is against the house rules. And if individuals breaking the house rules, we will follow up in an appropriate manner. That's why we have the on-site services team that works with property management to mitigate this behavior. Let's say it's loud music at night. We're going to work with them. You can't do that. That's against the house rules. Let's work on some solutions so you don't have to do this. Let's get you headphones, whatever that might look like. However, if that individual continues to break the same rule, that will lead to an eviction. And that is a best practice that we follow. And I think that becomes scary. Oh, hold on, wait, you're going to move in here. You're going to kick them out. Are you just going to send them packing to walk down the street with their bags? Which, again, that's not the case. If someone does go down the path of eviction, we have a very great policy and work on an exit plan for them with the county, with property management, to get them to an appropriate place. We don't just kick them out and wipe our hands and we're done. So it's all about that coordination to make sure the individual is going where they need to go. All right, so that's the end of our formal presentation of what we prepared. So now we're going to go to the questions that were submitted via our website. So I'm going to take a stab and go through those, and then we'll move on to other types of questions, and Kelsey will take over. So first question, is supportive housing unsafe, and will it burden our police department? Which I think is a great question. But I'm going to reference back to that destination home study that I did talk about. So people living in supportive housing are less likely to burden the police and other public resources than unhoused individual. And the research shows, and the specific study done in the county shows, that individuals who are experiencing homelessness utilize the police department, utilize the ERs, utilize the ambulances, and other emergency services way more frequently than someone who is in housing. And that is really due to A, having a place to live, and B, having that on-site supportive services team to help them out. So an individual that's homeless, they're most likely not going to a primary care physician, and they're moving around so often they don't have that connection. We're helping them get connected to primary care. So they're not using the ER as their primary care when they have a cold. They can go to a doctor. They have a doctor to call. We're working with them of, okay, we have this after hours response. If something's going on, they can call us. They don't have to just call the police. When you're living homeless on the street, that's kind of the only person to call if something's happening, or the police get called because they're sleeping somewhere they shouldn't, but now they have a home where they're going to stay. So it's really the team working around these wraparound services to help them be able to reduce those costs. All right, I don't think it went to my next question. There we go. All right, does supportive housing lower housing value? There's a study that was released by New York University, the Furman Center in 2008, excuse me, and they found that supportive housing does not have a negative impact on nearby property values. In fact, it showed that 5 years after supportive development opens, nearby property values tend to have risen more than similar areas with no such facility. Anecdotally, Jamboree can share this about any of our sites and when we come into a neighborhood and what happens to the neighborhood, but I always go back to the research of showing that it has been found that it does not. Next, was the city notified about Hillview Court? Why is the timeline so fast? That's a great question. It is very fast. We're all feeling it that it's fast. So the city council did receive 2 public memos about the property and the site that was prepared by city staff regarding Hillview Court. And then funds from Home Key must be expended by December 30th or they're lost. And this is a really unique time that the governor released these funds by right for individual nonprofit organizations to submit for, and they have to be used. And this is unprecedented time for this amount of money to be being released in this short of a time period. Question, what is the coordinated entry system and why can't Hillview Court only serve Milpitas residents? Again, that's a great question. So I talked a little bit about the coordinated entry system. So that is how individuals are going to be coming and referred to the site. And it's that standardized assessment that's connecting the best fit housing intervention prioritized by an individual need. And it's all about getting assessed. So the coordinated entry system starts with boots on the ground, agencies that are working with individuals who are experiencing homelessness that assess them for housing and get them placed onto this list. So it really is the front door to the community housing resources. So any individual in Milpitas that's experiencing homelessness who states that they want housing will get assessed and placed onto this list. And then they're prioritized by need and the appropriate housing fit. And now I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey for questions submitted by Zoom.
Let me unmute myself here. Great job, Danielle and Roger. So Danielle, we're going to go straight back to you just because that's easy. And the first question is, how long do you allow tenants to live at the facility? And I think this is a great way to reemphasize again the permanent nature of what we're building here.
Yeah, no, it is. So it is permanent housing. So there is no timeline. It's not transitional housing that typically has like a 2-year maximum of someone staying there. It's not a shelter that they go on 30-minute times or a night by night. They come in, they sign a lease, and they can stay forever unless they break that lease and work through the notice process and eventually get evicted. So anyone coming in, it is permanent housing. They sign a lease, they can stay there until a lot of times we'll help them move out and get a different type of housing if they've gotten a job and they want to move somewhere else. So as long as they meet the criteria, they can stay as long as they'd like. Kelsey, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Roger, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself for me, I'm going to come to you next. So I think we've explained a couple different times that this is a partnership between Jamboree, the county under the Home Key project, but there's been a lot of questions in the chat this evening about what kind of support we would need financially from Milpitas, either for the physical development, the supportive services, or to make the project a success. Could you address what we're asking from the city?
Sure. As you mentioned, Kelsey, we are hopeful to get funds from the project Home Key as well as from the county, but we are not requesting, and there is no need for additional funds from the city of Milpitas for Hillview Court.
And Danielle, could you touch on the supportive services piece?
Yeah, so for supportive services through Jamboree, we fund them in our operations budget. So the services are going to be getting paid out of the tenant rents and the subsidies. So we're not getting outside funding. It's not a year-to-year funding that we might be putting in for a grant and we might lose it. We incorporate our services into the operations budget of the site. So for as long as the site is operating, our services team will be funded through that. And the county services will be funded a little differently. If we want to go into that, Kelsey, we can definitely pass it over to the county. You're on mute again.
Danielle, I'm going to come back to you for another
Okay.
question here. So there is a question about, and I think this is a great way again to explain the funding structure of how do people pay rents for a lease if this does operate as an apartment? How do folks get connected to services in order to pay that rent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So everyone coming in is connected to a housing voucher. So through the coordinated entry system, they're working with the housing authority and getting connected to the housing voucher that is going to be placed on the unit here. So the housing authority in that voucher will, similar to like a Section 8 voucher, so that'll pay a portion of the rent, and then every individual living there will pay 30% of their income to cover the rest of the rent.
Thank you. So the next question I think is going to go to the county. I'm going to come to them on one that I think that they should be totally well versed to speak on. So there's been a lot of questions about, the coordinated entry system and how the process would go of giving qualified preference to Milpitas residents. So Eloisa or Andrew, could one of you turn on your mic and screen and just kind of maybe address that at a little bit more detail?
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm having a little bit of a technical glitch here.
All good. All good.
I don't think my camera is working. I'm sorry, Kelsey, I got a little confused as I was trying to deal with the technical issue. Would you mind repeating the question again?
Absolutely. So I think Danielle has gone over the basics of how the coordinated entry system works, but I'm wondering if you could dig a little bit more into what the process would be for the county of giving qualified preference to Milpitas residents. Just what does that process look like, getting folks assessed and all of that?
Sure. So the coordinated entry system, it's kind of the entry point, when unhoused residents are in need of some services, whether it's housing, other types of services. So like I said, it's the entry point where they get assessed and they are placed into different types of programs depending on their level of need. And there really isn't a resident preference as part of the coordinated entry system. It is more based on the need and which program could best meet their needs.
Thank you so much. Danielle, there was another question in the chat that dealt with kind of resident tenant selection. Can you talk a little bit about what background checks, credit checks, criminal checks that we put tenants and residents through?
Yeah, so they first go through the background check and all of that with the housing authority. So the housing authority is going to run their own background check and filter out a lot of individuals through that. And then once they've gone through that, then they come to our property management company and go through another criminal background check. So we are running to see if people have violent crimes or sex offenders or things of that nature. And we will turn people away if they have a background that is going to endanger the community. So everyone that lives on site does go through a background check.
Okay, and then there was another question about security. So could we maybe go over again, there's the sense of if we were to evict folks, they would end up kind of wandering through the neighborhoods. And the direct question was if we plan to pay for special security service if that does happen. Can you maybe walk through again what that process looks like?
Yeah, definitely. And we definitely will pay for security if needed. So traditionally our security on site is the controlled access. We have a desk clerk that is 24 hours on site. So they're there to be signing people in and out and guests if they're coming and going. And then we do have our camera system for that. And we do voice down camera system regularly. So there is 24/7 monitoring between certain hours and someone will voice down and talk to someone if there's stuff going on outside, or call the police department if it's obviously if there's anything that needs that level of intervention. So we have, that's just our baseline of security. And then if there are things that go above and beyond, and if we do see if there are people trying to come in and camp in front of us, the nice thing is we have all the staff, we have the property management who see that, and we work with the police department to mitigate that. So we will work with the cops. We will get people out of there if needed. And then we have brought in external security guards or things of that nature if that's ever been necessary. Very rarely is that level of security necessary at these types of sites if they're appropriately staffed, which this one is with all the level of supports. So it's all about working with the community, creating that process and that connection with the police department and making sure that we're secure and have the support there.
And just as a quick follow-up from Octavia in the chat, she wants to know if that changes because folks have mental health issues. Does that become any more difficult to enforce the rules?
I think if someone's going through an episode of mental health, yes, I mean, I think it brings on a different set of barriers, but I wouldn't say it's going to change our process and what we do. That's why we have licensed clinicians on site. Actually, I myself am a licensed clinician. That's why we have the appropriate level of staff to deal with any of those behaviors that come up. So we can work with them and assist them. And it doesn't change our policy, and our process is the same for just our affordable family units that don't have mental health clients there, or even individuals coming from homelessness. We do the same security setup.
Yeah, and I think it's important to clarify that, you know, it's not a requirement for Hillview Court to have a mental health diagnosis in order to live here. I can see that some folks are mentioning Diamond and the smaller unit count there. So Danielle, can you maybe address how those two projects are maybe similar in some ways, but also different in other ways?
Yeah, so Diamond Apartment Homes, which is here in Orange County and Anaheim, it's a smaller site, definitely. I want to say it's 24 or 29 units. I get them all mixed up in my head, but that site, it's smaller, and the intake process is an individual has to have a severe and persistent mental health issue and be chronically homeless to come in. So they're coming in, if you do not have one of those two things, or both of those two things together, they're not allowed to come on site. And when they are coming on site, they're coming connected with a county provided clinician, psychiatrist, the gauntlet. So that's why it is a smaller site. Hillview, on the other hand, does not have that mental health requirement. So that does make it different. We do have bigger projects that do very similar population to this, that's the homeless population.
Great. Danielle, I'm going to give you a little bit of a break and we're going to go over to Roger. So Roger, can you answer a question that was asked a little bit earlier in the chat about ownership and who's going to actually own the site?
Sure. Hillview Court will be owned by Jamboree, similar to the other properties that were shown earlier in the presentation. All those properties are also owned by Jamboree.
Excellent. Okay. So the next question that we have is, how do you outreach to individuals about the potential new property? So I'm going to ask Andrew or Eloisa to answer that question about what outreach is done to the homeless population to let them know about this facility.
Yes, thank you. So the county does have an outreach team where they go and meet with the unhoused residents and build a relationship in order to assist them in getting getting an assessment done so they can enter into the coordinated entry system.
Excellent, thank you. Danielle, could you go back to the slide that has a picture of the map of Milpitas and the rest of Santa Clara County? I'm going to ask you a question and I imagine that you'll want to reference it.
Yes, sorry, I have to go through them this way. I can't get them just to pick and choose. So I apologize, everyone.
So the question basically is, I think, kind of a distinction between what is affordable housing and what is supportive housing. And so I think we want to clarify that we didn't mean to say that Milpitas does not have affordable housing. We're certain that they do, but maybe you can explain a little bit of the differences of what supportive housing is and why it matters that there isn't any in the area.
Yeah, so permanent supportive housing is the housing that does prioritize and is specifically designed for individuals experiencing homelessness. Affordable housing is just anyone who meets within this income bracket. And with affordable housing, sometimes obviously people can use a Section 8 voucher that's portable, that the long wait list for, and use it there. But a majority of people, it's not connected to a housing voucher. They're paying just a reduced rent based off of their income. And so it really is a different population with different needs. Affordable housing does not have the on-site supportive services. They might have some services like Jamboree's affordable house. We might have a part-time staff member that's going to offer like an after-school program or tutoring, or maybe some larger community events, but they don't have those intensive case management, wraparound clinical services attached to it. So they are very different in what they are. So affordable housing, the only requirement to get in is a certain income. The permanent supportive housing is the homeless requirement and those wraparound services. You're on mute, Kelsey.
Danielle, I'm going to come back to you again. Been a lot of questions, especially in the last couple of minutes, about if we track residents when they leave the facility at night. There's a particular emphasis on them leaving in the middle of the night. So maybe you can just kind of address kind of the underlying issue there.
Yeah, so I mean, this is independent living, so they can come and go as they please. So they may leave in the middle of the night. However, we do have cameras, so we do know if people are coming and going. We would know if someone leaves every single night in the middle of the night. But no, we do not track residents where they go. They do not have to tell us where they go. It is similar as if you or I were to sign a lease and live in an apartment. It is their home. We do inspections. We have these wraparound services. There's a lot more support there, but we don't track them and limit them where they can come and go. However, if there is an issue of a resident leaving all the time in the middle of the night, our cameras are going to pick up on that. We're going to have a conversation with that individual and go, what's going on? Where are you going? And work with that person to figure out what's going on. And then that is what another reason Jamboree has its on-site services team to work with the community. So if there are concerns, and a lot of times we do neighborhood meetings, we've worked with HOAs that are next door to one of our properties. We've worked with schools that are next to one of our properties where a lot of our kids go to. We want to coordinate with anyone so we can hear the issues going on. An example is one of our properties was for homeless families in Anaheim. The school next door was where all of our kiddos went to, and there was like 65 new kids that went to that school. They had a lot of issues, and parents didn't know they were homeless. They've never had a school to go to parent-teacher conferences, etc. So we partnered with them and helped bridge that gap to know what's going on. And we would do the same here in Milpitas. If things are happening, we want to know. So we would be willing to have that open communication. If that's meetings, if that's just on call to be there, we'd be more than happy to do that. However, I will say in most of our sites, we're not seeing people coming and going in the middle of the night. Again, I know this is anecdotal, so take it what you will, but most of the time people now have a safe place to live. Most of the time when people are living at night, it's if they are working the night shift or something of that nature. And they do have community space at the site that they can go to at night as well if they want to. So most of the time they're not leaving, but.
So Roger, I'm going to come to you next on a question. If you could go ahead and unmute yourself, and maybe I should go to Danielle for this, but I'm going to let you go first. There's been questions in the chat about the ongoing operating costs of the facility. Can you maybe touch on how that's built into the deal?
Sure. Sorry. As Danielle mentioned, the revenue sources is the rents. Some of it is paid by the residents. As she mentioned, 30% of their income, whatever that might be. And then there's a differential that comes from the voucher program through the county program. And there is a operating budget. We operate our apartments like any other market rate apartments or any other apartments that individuals may own as investments. We do have additional costs, and the total expenses for the property run about $1.3 million for the property on an annual basis. And once again, those are paid through the rents paid by the tenants and also through the voucher program through the county.
And Roger, just to clarify that, is that funding guaranteed or is that something that we're going to lose in 3 years and have to go back and apply for?
Yeah, we won't. That's a very good question. It's not funding that we will have to go reapply for. It is a voucher program that we're working with the county on to assure that those voucher rents are something that we can count on year to year. And also, more importantly, I didn't mention this in the earlier response, but the funding for the property is home key, a loan from the county, but also a permanent loan with a third-party lender. And our third-party lender wants to make sure that they get their loan service or they get their loan payments every month or every year. So we will be working with the county to assure that through the voucher program.
Danielle, could you just clarify too on the back end of what Roger just said? I think some might have heard it as a job requirement. Can you explain that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, there is no job requirement whatsoever. An individual could possibly come in with zero income and they would pay 30% of their income. Most of our folks come in, they might have SSI, they might be on some sort of disability. So they'd be paying whatever that is from that $900, $800 that they're getting per month. But they do not have to have a job to come in. We do not force them to get a job once in, because everyone has a different level and different goals of where they're at.
And then Danielle, I'm going to come back to you again too. So there's been some people in the chat saying that they have heard anecdotally, so I'll just ask you to respond anecdotally as well, that crime has substantially increased around our supportive housing sites. Could you maybe address, as in your experience as the director of those services, if you've ever seen anything like that?
Yeah, actually, we've never seen that at any of our sites. We are typically coming into a neighborhood and we are bettering the neighborhood. Most of the time, like our Diamond Isle site, for example, I want to say, I don't remember the numbers, so I'm not going to speak numbers, but one year we worked with the police department and they're like, we're getting so many calls from your residents, but it was them calling about other things going on in the neighborhood because they kept seeing stuff that were happening and they would call and report it to the police and be catching other people happening. It was not our residents doing anything. It was them seeing what's happening around the neighborhood and calling, because they take pride in having a home. A lot of folks, it's like Willy Wonka and getting the golden ticket when you get into housing. It takes a long time. People are on this list a long time. It's a really, really small, scarce resource out there. So once they get in, they want to keep it. And most people are proud to have a home and they're decorating it and they want to feel safe. I think the most I deal with from our residents is complaints that they want more cameras, or complaints that they don't feel safe. They don't want people from the outside neighborhood coming into their facility. So that is not what we've seen at our sites. It's typically people on the outside trying to come in, and we're making sure that doesn't happen.
Excellent. So there's a question for the county in the chat. So I'm going to ask either Andrew or Eloise to turn their microphone on. So you mentioned in an earlier comment about prioritizing based on need, which can be a lot of different things: length of time that a person has been homelessness, the severity of their homelessness. And what this person wants to know is if there is any way for you to give a general sense of the percentage of folks that would be living at Hillview that might have a substance abuse issue, might have a mental illness issue. I'm not sure if there's any way to quantify that, but I wanted to make sure we asked that question.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't have data on that. I am happy to look into that and get back to you. But unfortunately, I don't have data on that at this moment.
Okay. Danielle, I am going to come back to you again because we're still getting questions on the job piece. So I'm going to give you another bat at it. And I'm going to read this one word for word. Okay. If the resident's income is zero, how will they pay 30% of zero? And if Jamboree does not get the funds from the government, how will the property continue? And will we ever ask the city of Milpitas or their police force to, increase their services and all of that?
Yeah, so if they have an income of zero and it's 30% of zero, they're paying zero. So they do not have to have a job. to be moving in. They do not have to have an income to be moving in. Their housing voucher would cover that. And for the services, as the operations that Roger's talking about, that's built in, and that's in our agreements with the county, who's getting the money from the state and HUD. So there are bigger issues that would have to happen. So we're guaranteed these funds to be being received to them. As for asking Milpitas for money, I'll let Roger kind of tackle that. But as for the police department, we've never asked anything from the police department financially. There's nothing that we could ask. We wouldn't ask them to have someone on site. We wouldn't ask them anything of that nature. We've worked with and partnered with the police department to have them present to our residents. So we've had residents want to start a neighborhood watch, or we've had residents concerned about X, Y, and Z. We might try to partner, similar to like what you see at elementary schools when the police go and like do a presentation, or the fire department goes and do it as a presentation. We'll ask them to sometimes do that if the residents are really curious of what to do in an emergency and things of that nature. But there's nothing that we'd be asking the police to come man a car in front of our building. We would ask to partner with them and have that open communication, but never anything increasing their funding or anything of that nature.
Regarding the city of Milpitas, we have no immediate plans, as mentioned earlier, to ask for any funding from the city of Milpitas, and in the future, we have no plans to do so either.
Danielle, the next question is, are residents allowed to have drugs, alcohol, cigarettes while in their apartment? Are they checked when they enter the facility?
So this is independent housing. So we're not searching their belongings when they come in. We're not searching them when they come and go, similar to a shelter, because this is independent living. And this is what the research shows of Housing First, of being the most effective. And actually all the research shows that this is much more effective to better life outcomes than a shelter or than transitional housing. So this is what is a national best practice to follow. However, that being said, if someone is using drugs in their unit, we do have inspections. So we do have multiple inspections throughout the year when the property management team goes in and inspects individuals' units for health and safety. If anything is reported that an individual is using drugs, that is 100% against the lease and would result in a release violation and the offer of supportive services if they do have any sort of alcoholism or drug addiction. But similar to my house, your house, no one can come into my house and tell me I'm going to start searching for drugs. It's a similar case at this site.
Okay, Danielle, coming back to you again. In your experience, how are people going to be, quote, rehabilitated if they're not motivated to look for jobs? I think that's addressing the issue of not needing a job to be qualified for supportive housing.
Yeah. So everyone that comes in is at a different stage. Everyone that comes in is at a different physical capability and different mental capability. So when individuals do come in, we work on an individualized treatment plan. So we sit down one-on-one with an individual, go over all of their strengths and go over all their needs of, do you need income? Because most likely if they are at zero income, that person doesn't want to be at zero income. No one doesn't want to have money to buy groceries or pay for electricity or anything of that nature. So we'll work with them. All right, what can we do to get there? And folks coming in are going to be, I've had clients that have their doctorate, and I've had clients that didn't go past elementary school. So we really take the individual, what they're coming in, what their ability is, and getting them connected to those appropriate resources. In tradition, and in my experience, no one's coming in going, all right, I'm happy with where I'm at. I want to keep living like I'm homeless and have nothing. People do come in, no one's saying, I don't want housing. We're not forcing this upon them. So it's already an individual who's wanting to better themselves that coming in. And then we work on with them with where they're at. And there's a lot of different therapeutic techniques that I won't get into that we use to motivate and engage and make sure that they're getting connected. And it takes time. Every individual that moves in, they're on a different trajectory. Not one person has the same plan, and not every person's gonna finish the same stuff. I mean, I have a site that right now I have 4 individuals that just started nursing school. I have another site that we have people that are just like thinking about going back to school, and we're, you know, through that process of what that means for them. So it really is an individual case by case.
And Danielle, can you also clarify how you would know that a person is breaking their lease if you are not checking them as they're coming in and leaving?
Yeah. So I think, I'm assuming this is probably related mostly to like the drugs and alcohol. So I think all of us can take a step back, think of someone who's intoxicated, think of someone who's using drugs, think of the behaviors that follow those. That person's not just living in their unit making no noise. That person's not walking straight down the hallway. That person's not following every rule and doing that secretly, maybe for like a short period of time, but it always comes out. So we have cameras, we have on-site staff there 24/7. We know what's going on. We see the individuals, we see what's happening. And so then those behaviors would get addressed. Like, all right, you're yelling every night in the middle of the night. It might be because of drugs. I don't care what they're yelling about. That yelling's going to kick them out. So it really is, those behaviors are going to come out. And then we do create a community. And so kind of when I went into the supportive services, a lot of it is community building. We want our residents to take pride where they live. We create resident councils. So we'll have residents who want to be involved and have a resident council so they can plan meetings and kind of be leaders on site. Our residents are typically the biggest snitches, and that's when we find out things are going on. They all know everything happening. And so they'll typically, we have a whole process for them to put an incident report in. If they hear something, if they see something, they can write an anonymous report to property management with the time that something happened, the date. We'll watch cameras, we'll keep an eye out for it. So there really is a lot of systems in place to figure out what's going on, and nothing stays hidden.
So the next question is going to go to the county. The question is, how many people are on the wait list for supportive housing in the county right now? Andrew?
Yes, I don't have that number right off the top of my head, but I can find that out.
Okay, let me know if you get it and I can come back to you again.
Okay.
Danielle, I'm going to come to you next. So folks have gone to our website and seen that we have a 90% success rate when it comes to our supportive housing model. The question is, what is the plan for the rest of the 10%?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of things that happen to that other 10%, and not everyone is ready for housing, and not everyone can follow these rules, and not everyone likes having to have basically their whole life spread out. It's a really intense process getting in, and there's a lot of eyes once they're in. So there is 10% that end up leaving. A lot of times it's for a higher level of care. So we see a lot of people who are exiting, they're medically fragile or their mental health is fragile. So they're going into like a boarding care facility, or they're going into a nursing home. They're going into some higher level of care. We'll work with people who get reunited with their family members. So they might move back in with a family member. Sometimes people will go back to a shelter because they aren't ready. So there is a percentage that will go back into shelters. But really it's looking at another program. Sometimes they'll transfer to another housing program. Sometimes they might want to go rent a room. So it really depends, but it's really getting creative of where these individuals can go and what's going to be best for them. It's really looking at, all right, what are your current needs? And this isn't meeting them right now. So where can we get you that's going to meet your needs?
And Danielle, could you go back to talking a little bit about the cost savings piece of it? I know that you touched over it, but there's been probably about 3 or 4 more follow-up questions in the chat about use of public services. I did drop our link to the cost of homelessness study in there that was done with the University of California, Irvine, which found that it was 50% cheaper to house folks in permanent supportive housing than leaving them on the street. But can you drill down into why that is?
Yeah, so when an individual's homeless, there's a lot going on. So someone's homeless. Let's think about, I'm living on the streets. I might be living in a park. I might have issues going on. You're already susceptible to a lot more crime happening to you. Most of our folks are victims. A lot of stuff can happen to them. You're exposed to the elements. Your health is fragile. You're not getting the appropriate food. You're not getting the appropriate medical care. So you're already, all of your health risks are completely increasing. Your risk for something violent happening to you is increasing. So when an individual's homeless, living on the street, they're not going to a primary care physician. Most of them might have Medi-Cal, and then you just get assigned a provider, and it might be completely across the county that you can't get in because it's going to take you 3 hours on the bus. So it's easier to go down the street and get your medical care from the ER. We all know ER is fantastic for emergencies. However, it's not good for preventative care. It's not going to give you your dental care that you need. You might leave with some prescriptions and a time to follow up, but you probably, by the time you leave, you lose the paperwork somewhere, your bag gets stolen. You might leave with a myriad of medications, and they're like, you need to take these 3 times a day. This medication needs to be refrigerated. You need to elevate your leg 5 hours a day. I mean, there's all these rules that as an individual experiencing homelessness, you cannot follow that to properly take care of yourself while you're on the streets. And so the hospital bills go completely up. So that's so much more expensive. Once someone's in housing, they're able to take care of themselves. They have the support system there, the services staff to help them take their medications, to help them find storage, and to find that primary care physician. We help with transportation to get them connected to that primary care. So the ER and the emergency services go down. And typically when an individual is homeless going to the ER, they're taking an ambulance, which is another monster cost. And then the police services is in the fire department. A lot of times when an individual's homeless, they might be sleeping somewhere they shouldn't be. So they're getting that police contact, which is our taxpayer dollars going to that police contact. Once they're in housing, they're not getting that police contact. In the middle of the night, something happens, they're scared, whatever that might be, they're calling the cops. That's the only outlet. There's no one else to call. They get in a verbal altercation, they're calling the cops. They're somewhere they shouldn't be, they feel unsafe, they're calling the cops. So that's a big expense that once in their housing, we can help mitigate, and they can build the communication methods necessary, so then they're not using those costs. Those are the main ones that are coming to my mind right now.
Great. Danielle, one more question before we're going to turn over to a different part of the section. So I just want to ask it as point blank as this question was asked to us. Is there ever a reason that we would ever evict somebody and leave them for the Milpitas Police Department to deal with?
No, we have never done that. We have never done that ever in our time. We would potentially, I'm just trying to think of a situation that would happen. No, we would never just evict someone and leave them for someone else to deal with. So the supportive services team, the county, the housing authority, the property management team would all be involved in that process. If something happened and the individual was dangerous, the police department might get called for like protection or safety, but typically we'd bring in our own in-house security. We have had one site where if someone was getting evicted, he said something threatening to one of our staff members, they didn't feel comfortable, so we paid for on-site security to come and help us when he left, and he left peacefully and went on to the, I think we took him to a shelter after. So no, I don't see a situation where we'd ever wipe our hands of someone. Really, the philosophy for Jamboree, for the county, is whatever it takes. And we would do that. So I can't think of a situation that would ever happen.
Okay. And I just wanted to note the county did message me. There was a question asked earlier of how many people are currently on the waiting list for supportive housing in Santa Clara County. And the answer to that is 9,000. Danielle, what experience does Jamboree have dealing and supporting people with mental illness? Can you be specific with the types of mental illness that we have experience working with?
Yeah, we have lots of experience. I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but I bet on this group, there's a lot of people that have a diagnosable mental illness. Just if you look statistically, the population, there's a lot of people at our affordable housing sites that have a mental illness. But we do have our 6 permanent supportive housing sites that have individuals that are experiencing a range of mental illness. There's a myriad of diagnoses that we've seen. So we see anything from severe major depression, we've seen bipolar, we've seen schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder. I think we've seen them all and we've dealt with them all. I can't say that there's like a traditional or typical resident that we see coming in with a mental health issue. We're all unique. We've seen a lot of different diagnoses, but we treat everyone like a human and we work with them to get where they need to go. It doesn't matter what their diagnosis is. It matters what we can do to help them and live successfully in housing. And so, as I said, we have the 6 permanent supportive housing sites that have a myriad of individuals experiencing mental health. And a lot of our affordable housing, we've seen a huge rise, especially during COVID, of mental health issues coming out on these sites, especially with our teenagers. We've had to bring a lot more mental health services just to the normal affordable site. So we see it across our whole entire portfolio, but specifically at our permanent supportive housing.
And just to clarify again, we got another question about why our other sites with MHSA are so much smaller. Can you again clarify that this is not a MHSA site, maybe what some of those differences are?
Yeah, so this is not an MHSA site, as Kelsey said. MHSA sites with those small chunks of, okay, there's only 20 people living here that have this this designation. So they have to have a severe and persistent mental health diagnosis. To get that is really hard by the county. So here in Orange County, an example is we had a monster encampment of the riverbed, and let's say there was 3,000 people living there. I want to say there was about 6% that they identified as having severe and persistent mental illness. So out of this homeless population, there's only a small percentage that can get this classification. So it's the severe and persistent mental health diagnosis, which this site does not have the requirement of. And then they have to be connected to the county services and receiving these intensive case management services. It's the most intensive services the county offers through the behavioral health system. So there's a lot of additional requirements to get that designation, which is why they're a lot smaller at the site. And then the funding, there's not as much funding for it. So there's not, Roger could probably speak to this better than I can. Typically it's, okay, we have funding for X amount of units. It's not a huge funding pool where they can fund a whole site.
Danielle, with your experience at our other supportive housing sites, what percentage would you say of the residents either work or volunteer?
So I'm trying to think, I just ran this statistic a couple weeks ago. I want to say across our 6 sites, it was 63% either worked or volunteered in our permits for housing. It was that or 65. I'm getting that in one other number kind of twisted in my head, but it's about 65%, 63% that we've seen that are working or volunteering in some way. And we do offer volunteer opportunities on site for our folks.
Okay.
And about 35% were in school and decided to go back to school of what we found at our sites.
All right. And then last question we're going to take from the chat. I'll ask it is, what are the other 50% of non-working people doing with their time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, what are they doing? So a lot of folks, we're actually trying to get them out of their units. A lot of people isolate. They're so happy to have a unit. They're living there. But we can go back here. I have this slideshow open, so I'm going to go back to it. Wrong way. Maybe I won't go back to it. Let's see. This one. So we have all these different, it's part of our services plan. So those who aren't potentially working, they might be doing employment services and working towards getting employment. So we might be connecting them to resources to do that. It's like a cruise calendar of events on our site sometimes. I always say we're a director of events. So there's a lot of events happening on site. Traditionally at most of our sites, pre-COVID, there's about 3 to 4 groups happening on site. So a lot of residents, about 75% of our folks attend an on-site group at multiple times a month. So they can go to that community group. They might volunteer on site. We have fun groups. We'll do bingo groups. We'll do mental health groups. We'll do communication groups, cooking groups, whatever they might need. So they'll be attending groups on site. We'll work on community engagement. So if they do want to volunteer or get involved in a church or just getting back integrated into a community, we'll help them do that. Family reunification. So we do help residents reconnect with family. It's actually one of the most awesome parts of the job is getting people connected again to family or kids that they haven't seen in a long time. And that is a process. So they might start spending more time with family members, spending the night there. So they might be doing things like that. And then as you see, meaningful daily life activities. So we're working on just getting them in a schedule. And so if someone's not working, it's like, all right, what's going to be your morning routine? What do you need in your life? We'll have yoga classes, we'll have art classes. What can you incorporate in your life and your daily, during your daily schedule to live a meaningful and fulfilled life? So that's traditionally what we're doing. They're doing on-site groups. They're getting maybe connected with family. They're volunteering. And we're working on that program so that they can just kind of be living their best life and recovering. A lot of folks living on the street, I'm sure everyone here can imagine, it's traumatic. Like there's so much trauma that happens living on the street, and it might just be the trauma of insecurity of not knowing or sleeping or food. So when they first move in, sometimes it's a breathing, like I just need to breathe and like process what happened to me, and then I start getting connected again. So
Okay, so I think, let me see here. Danielle, could you go over the background screening phase just one more time? I'm going to drop some more information into the chat for folks that are asking about that.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the housing authority does do their own background check, and they have certain issues that they're going to flag. I can't speak to the Santa Clara Housing Authority at the moment. I don't know if the county wants to jump in and talk about that, but the housing authority is going to screen for certain things. And then they get sent to Jamboree, and Jamboree has its own set of resident criteria and what we can accept and what we can't. So we're doing a criminal background check, and we are screening for violent crimes. That could be domestic violence, that could be assault, that can be a myriad of different things that is considered like a violent crime. So we're looking for that on on someone's background, and that's an automatic flag for this person not to get accepted. We're looking for sex offender. That's another automatic flag of someone who's not going to get accepted. We do allow an individual to like share their story of what happened to them if it's there, and they can try to appeal the process of like, hey, this happened 7 years ago. I've now been in recovery for the last 5 years. Here's my psychiatrist note. Here's my therapist note, and try to appeal the process. And then that's taken and reviewed with the county and with this on-site services team. But those are the things we're looking for, and they do get flagged, and those are reasons to not accept an individual to live at the site.
Okay. So with that, I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat. So with the remaining 15 minutes that we have, I am going to start unmuting people that raise their hands so they can ask questions. Danielle, if you could go back to that initial slide so we can just remind folks what our rules are. So this meeting will run until 7:30. We'll take as many questions as we can between now and then. So please just ask your question quickly, and we'll try to respond just as quickly so we can get to more folks. You're welcome to just tell us what you think, but this is a time for you to ask questions and for us to hopefully be able to answer them. So if you have a question, go ahead and feel free to raise your hand, and we'll start to unmute people. And for those of you that are looking for the raise hand button, if you click on participants, you should see an option. Also on the left-hand side in the participant window, if you click left on your mic, there should be an option to raise your hand as well. So I'm going to unmute our first person that has raised their hand and let them ask their question.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. My name is Joe Tong, and I'm a Milpitas resident. So I think a couple of news that the other folks should know that the Milpitas City Council actually voted to pursue the litigation against all parties involved in this project. And also we learned from the director of the city planning, this is not the first time they rejected this. And it seems that you using the kind of pandemic funding, like to fund this project, which has previously been rejected and did not consult with any of residents. I feel like this is kind of really disrespectful for us. And my specific question is about the location. So also, again, according to the director of city planning, they say that you guys reach out to the city council about the location, and you said you already, make agreement with the hotel that this is the location that you choose. But all this kind of process is not involving our residents. So why do you choose this location where we have a lot of residents and there's an alcohol like the Bev Mall and also the Safeway around here? Thank you.
I'll go ahead and start, and if the county would like to chime in, feel free. So Jamboree worked very closely with the county over
You're on mute, Roger.
sorry about that. Told myself I wasn't going to do that today. Sorry about that, everyone. So we've been working with the county to identify sites throughout Santa Clara County for over 18 months, almost 24 months. And we've working with them based on different criteria, based on its location to transportation, its proximity to the grocery stores, proximity to other facilities and other needs that the residents might have. So we looked at several sites, and we were fortunate that this site was one of the few that we were able to identify and work with the owner of the property to see if they would be open to selling the property. So then we also mentioned, and Jamboree reached out to the city to talk about the property. And as mentioned in the earlier presentation, there is a couple of different memos that talk about the timeline and the processes that Jamboree has gone through, and the communications that we've had with city staff, and the presentations that we've also had with city council members through various means. So if the county would like to add anything to it, feel free.
Okay. I am going to unmute William next. William, you should be unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this meeting and give us an opportunity to raise our voice. This housing project is a potential time bomb for us. In the next 55 years, no one knows what will happen. But just take one person to walk into the hotel next door to cause major damage. Just take one person to walk to the nearby school to bring tears to the parents' eyes. Just take one person to walk to the nearby park to harm our children. Just take one person to walk to the street corners to sell drugs to our teenagers. Please withdraw this project. There are other alternatives to help homeless. This project convert into 132 units. Each apartment costs $1.3 million, only 300 square feet, which means 4,200 per square feet. A mobile home in a gated community only costs 1/10 of the price for 5 times the area. So please stop this overpriced project. Thank you.
So Danielle or Roger, I don't know if there was a question there, but maybe you want to address kind of Danielle, I think maybe you could address some of the concerns up front with interactions and that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% hear that. I think it only takes one person. It only takes one person, regardless if this project is here or not. It only takes one unhoused homeless individual for that to happen, getting them into housing and with the appropriate supports wrapped around them. That is what changed. That's when we see change. And just because an individual is homeless does not mean that they are a drug addict. It does not mean that they're a violent criminal. It does not mean that they're going to come in and ruin a community. I think the idea of a homeless individual, we think of that scary person. We think of that person screaming on the street corner that has a mental health diagnosis. However, that is only a small portion of the population. So I think it does only take one person. However, this site doesn't mean that this is going to be that one person. We're surrounding them with support. We're surrounding them to get everything that they need. And there is constant surveillance and there is constant monitoring. And there is background checks, so we know who's coming in and living with us. We know if this is someone with a history of violence. traditionally, if we do look at one person coming into our schools and one person coming into a park, most of the time, if you look in the news and you look at the research, it's not a homeless individual who's that one person. It's unfortunately those who are not getting treated mental health, untreated mental health symptoms that are just living amongst the population. But I hear that. That's all I got, Kelsey.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kelsey, I think the speaker mentioned something about $1.3 million per unit. I think what he was probably referencing was my what I mentioned earlier, which was the operating cost, which was $1.3 million per year. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Roger. Okay, Stephen, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. And then you can go ahead and ask your question. Stephen, we should be able to hear you.
Okay, great. From Jamboree earlier, I thought I heard that preference was given to Milpitas residents. From what the county said, that's not the case. And I guess my general thought is that for the leaders of the county and for the city, I'm looking for them to interact with each other and see if they can't come up with a win-win situation. So I guess the main question I have is this a take it or leave it proposition for the city, or is there room for negotiation for the city and the county can work together to come up with something that's acceptable to everybody?
Roger, I'm going to pivot to you first on that one, and then you can kick it to whoever you want to go to next.
Sure. I'll let Danielle address the question about the preference for Milpitas residents, and we'll clarify that. Regarding there is no discretionary requirements or review or vote by the city of Milpitas for this particular development. So we are not seeking any funding from the city of Milpitas.
Yeah, and then as for the preference, we were in the beginning working with the county and working with the city for that preference. Jamboree does not have control over the preference. We were given the desire for a preference, so we let our partners know. I know we were in a meeting with the county presenting to the city of what it takes to get a preference and what that would look like. And I believe that the city then was taking that presentation and deciding if they wanted to go with that or not. Eloisa, I don't know if any from the county has more to say on that, but we did put that request out to the partners and they were looking into it. And I know that the county did talk to the city about what that would look like and what that would take.
Yeah, thank you. At this time, there is no preference. As I mentioned earlier, we need to go through our coordinated entry system, and residents are placed depending on their what we call the level of acuity, so their level of need. So it could be, the next person that's at the top of the list may not be a Milpitas resident. They could be from a different jurisdiction, but a Milpitas resident may also be given the opportunity to get a placement in a city outside of Milpitas. And I believe what you were referencing, Danielle, is the county does also provide funding for services. Mm-hmm. And, if the city were able to contribute for the services, then there is, we could be able to implement a preference. But unfortunately, because it's all coming from the county, we are unable to establish a Milpitas preference.
Thanks, Eloisa.
Okay, I'm going to ask Karen to unmute herself.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Lower my hand down here. Thanks for this opportunity and thanks for the information in this presentation. I just wanted to comment that I drove around the extended stay hotel this afternoon. I've lived in Milpitas since 1983. I'm aware of where it was, but I just wanted to drive around. It's tucked away behind the Embassy Suites and close to the Executive Office Park. It's not close to housing. It's a little ways away from a park. I think it's in a great location. One of the sticking points for the residents of Milpitas does seem to be this issue of having Milpitas residents given some kind of priority, and yet I understand that the homeless problem is countywide, and it's a regional problem. And as much as I'd like that to happen, I get that it's not something that that we may be able to have. Here's my question has to do, it's my understanding that about a third of the money, about a third of the $80 million is coming from the CARES Act, from the federal government. And they're the ones, the federal government has put this December 30th or 31st deadline to spend the money, if I'm correct about that.
Mm-hmm.
If in this process of trying to work through this, and we've got some major issues with the city, I realize, if we miss that deadline, is that a possibility this project could still go through?
Yeah, I'll be happy to address that. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for your comments and your question. Regarding the funding source, yes, there is. The funding is coming through the CARES Act, and it's through the state's program called Project Home Key. And there is a mandatory funding requirement by December 30th of this year. So it's one-time funding available. And if the funding is not used, the chances of other sources of funds equivalent to the amount that for the CARES Act, chances are pretty low. So, so this is an opportunity for us in the county to utilize funding of $650 million to solve homelessness.
Thank you, Roger. All right, Karen, I'm going to put you back on mute. And then Octavia, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Sure.
There you go. We can hear you.
Hi. So, yeah, thank you for giving me the chance to talk too. I just want to come back to our first speaker from the community who mentioned the risk that this project would bring to our community, because we are bringing people from outside Milpitas, and I understand, Danielle, you think that everybody can commit a crime, but bringing people from outside this small city would increase the risk for us, and not to mention the disproportionate numbers we are talking here. We want to house here about 132 people with homelessness risk, but actually they are coming from San Francisco, they could come from Santa Clara, they could come from bigger cities who have bigger opportunities and better location than this one, which is in the heart of the city. It's a commercial center. Everybody, I go to Safeway to buy food from there, and I could be at risk. If somebody who's having an abuse, disease could attack me. And why would I risk that? And why our city has to pay this price? That's my question, because I want to help people, but they can have to be located exactly what one of the other people talk about, in a gated community where there is security and people are protected. We are going to be left alone to deal with people, walking around this center, trying to get in, or this is very risky. And I don't think it's fair for a small city like Milpitas to pay the price for the Santa Clara County, who's trying to find a place to use the money. I think it's not fair. And there could be gated communities with RVs where these people can have a good life and they can be protected over there. So yeah, I'm really disappointed in this decision being made and this rush judgment only to use the money without taking care about the people who pay taxes in this city, Milpitas. And not only to the city, but we pay taxes to the Santa Clara County and to the state too, to the federal government too. So it's really disappointing. So I wish we could be heard.
Yeah.
I wish we could.
Thank you so much, Octavia, for your comment. I'm going to go ahead and put you back on mute. I want to note that we are at 7:30. So we're going to take one more question after Octavia's. So either Danielle, Roger, do you want to kind of just address some of her concerns and statements?
Go ahead, Danielle.
What was that, Roger? Yeah, I can start. So I think, you bring up some great concerns. You definitely do. It is in the heart of a city, and why can't we put people behind a gated community far away? All the research shows and all the evidence shows that all these properties and across the country that integration and getting these people into society is how we improve lives and better communities. Putting them somewhere else and thinking that they should all be together, that's perpetuating the problem. It's getting individuals into housing, getting them the support that they need, and getting them reintegrated into the community. I think once they are in our housing, they are housed individuals, and it's no longer the scary homeless person on the side of the street. Now this is an individual who has a shower, they have food, they have assistance to get their needs met, and are living as a community member. And I hear you about outsiders coming into the community. In Milpitas, it's about 81% of the individuals experiencing homelessness are from Santa Clara County before being homeless. And I think, yes, they're coming from outside cities into Milpitas. However, when they come onto our site, it's all about building that community, getting them connected in the community, becoming proud of their community, and becoming a Milpitas resident, and taking pride in becoming a Milpitas resident. And so that's what the supportive services team is working on with these individuals, to take that pride and become a functioning member of the community that gives back. Roger, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I just wanted to clarify the residents or the folks on the coordinated entry list that we've referenced several times. Also, we've called it the waiting list. The 9,000 folks are folks that are currently only in Santa Clara County, not from the outside other counties, only within Santa Clara County.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Rika to unmute herself, because she said that she put their hand up first, and I must have missed them. So I'm asking them to unmute themselves right now. And I don't seem to be getting a response from them. Rika, can you unmute yourself? Okay. Alan, since you're ready to go and right there, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself, and you can go ahead and go.
First of all, good evening, everyone. So I'm very sure I just go straightly to the point. I live here since 1979. And this town before is San Jose called the garbage town. Nobody would like to live in here. And since I'm come and I see a lot of change here, but Milpitas still have a lot of problems. For example, we do not have a medical center. The Kaiser, different story. So your guy told me that a good location and a lot of study find out that's a good location. I don't agree with it. You know why? Because if something happened, that means ambulance coming and bring that guy to San Jose. Correct me, I'm wrong, or bring to Fremont, right? That's true? Can someone tell me that? So don't tell me that it's a good location for. I still call that is the homeless shelter. Don't give me the fancy home key whatsoever. This project for me should be no. Somebody put the money in the pocket. And then Milpitas still have a lot of problems beside that. We don't have enough school for the kid. The house keep building home. A lot of people coming here, population increasing. I'm the realtor, so I know the area. And then we do not have enough school. And now you bring another problem to Milpitas, and you guys tell me, and better the young lady there say, oh, they can live over there forever. I remember that, right? You say that. Not certain forever, because Milpitas, we don't want to carry another burden. And don't tell me the Milpitas will not pay anything. Because doing that, Milpitas lost, you know what we lost? We lost the hotel tax. We lost the property tax for that building. So don't tell me this good for Milpitas. And I agree with you, this homeless people in from our county, but I'm bet with you, very small percentage from Milpitas, from different cities. For example, San Jose, Santa Clara, Campbell area, they're bigger, they have more building, they have more empty building and hotel. Why don't you guys do study and open there? And why you guys pick right here in Milpitas? And that is the central Milpitas, the face of the city. And we don't have a medical center here. And you tell me that's a good thing to do? No, I don't think it's a good thing to do. And I want the city council, Milpitas, and the county work together and remove this project from Milpitas. So now the question I'm asking you, and no one answered to me yet, we do not have a medical center here, right? If something happened, the ambulance coming here and police coming here, the fire department coming there and bring that person to the different town. So who pay for that? You see that? So don't tell me that this is good for Milpitas. That's all I'm have. And I want you to respond to my question.
So I just want to clarify the question then is the no medical center, correct?
Yeah, we do not have a medical center in Milpitas for the people for emergency. We don't.
Eloisa, would you be able to answer that from a county perspective and how you guys utilize your systems and the medical treatment for your clients?
So sorry, Danielle, so your question is how would we handle a client's medical needs if there is no medical center?
Yes.
Yes, so, you know, as part of the, you know, as mentioned earlier, there are supportive services that are offered in addition to the housing. So, you know, there would be ongoing assistance in providing or in getting a person's needs met in terms of medical issues. If there is no medical facility in Milpitas, presumably they would be taken to the next closest medical facility in the case of an emergency.
Thanks, Eloisa. And I'll just jump on top of that. And so the whole goal of supportive housing is getting an individual in and getting them connected to preventative care, getting them connected to their primary care physician, getting them connected to specialists that they need. So they have doctors within the community that they're seeing. All of the research shows that there are better health outcomes once an individual comes into housing and they improve. And then it would just be like anyone else on this call who lives in Milpitas and an emergency happens, you would be going to the next closest medical center. We're not using medical facilities or emergency services as the primary care for these individuals. It's not the place they're going to every single time something happens. We're working on all the preventative care, getting them connected to doctors just like anyone else on this call, and then they would use the emergency services that everyone else on this call utilizes. So I'll just add that to that. Thanks, Kelsey.
Okay, so we've gone over by about 10 minutes. So Danielle, can you go to the last slide? I know that you're completely at the beginning of the presentation now.
No worries. I know, I wish I figured it out finally. Sorry, everyone, I could have done this earlier. Okay, there we go.
So for any additional questions that you have, you can send us an email at outreach@jamboreehousing.com. I am the one that responds to those, so you can address them to me, Kelsey, or you can check out our website at www.jamboreehousing.com/Hillview Court Milpitas. So that's going to go ahead and conclude our second community meeting. Please check back at the website for the next update on the project. Thank you.